welcome to Sometimes in Shambles. My name is Melissa, and this is my podcast. I am here again today with Shannon. If you want to say hi. And today we are going to be talking about the aftermath and the effects, I guess, that we've had from leaving the church. So that includes telling friends and families and their reactions, and what we believe now and what we kind of still deal with from the church. And then also, I don't think there's any definitions or anything that we'll have to do this episode.
I don't think so either, but if you haven't listened to the first 2 episodes in this series, probably just listen to those first so that you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're not gonna really talk about our experience leaving the church anymore because we already did that episode. So we just kind of have questions that we're going to be asking, and then we both will give our answers. So the first one is, how did you tell your friends and family, and how did they react?
This is actually a question I get a lot, which I think is really nice, actually, because it's mostly from people who know that I left and are kind of worried about me. One of my friends' moms asked me, has everything gone well? How did your family take it? And I think that's just such a nice thing to ask, because it's basically just people who are worried that it has caused problems in my relationships, which sadly is something you have to worry about when you leave the church. So I think it's a good thing to talk about, because obviously it can be super hard when someone you love leaves the church. I get it. It's the people in the church believe that if you leave, you're basically not going to heaven and you're not going to be with your family forever. So of course that's so heartbreaking. If I believed that, and I did for a long time, that's so sad.
Yeah, and I remember when I was really active in the church in high school, especially when I would go to EFY and come back from it, you're on this spiritual high, and I would legitimately get sad that and almost frustrated that other people aren't in the church and they're missing out on this great thing.
Yeah, totally. So I totally get how it can be so heartbreaking, but at the same time, if you truly care about that person, that shouldn't be the basis of your relationship. Whether they go to church or not shouldn't be the reason that you are friends with them or love them or whatever. So I think a big reason we wanted to do this episode was to talk about what to do if someone you love leaves the church, and if they tell you, or even if they don't tell you, how to react. So I kind of want to talk about 3 examples of how I told my friends and family and how they reacted, and some was good and some was not so good.
And just to make a note, this also is just from our experiences and what we would have liked to receive. And so other people might be different, but I think there are definitely
there's
obvious
better ways to respond.
Yeah, obvious bad ways and good ways.
Yeah. So the first, well, I shouldn't say the first, but the first main people I told were my parents, and I was terrified to tell them. I was really nervous. I wasn't nervous that they would be mad at me or disown me or whatever, but I just didn't want to make them sad and hurt. And so I was really nervous to tell them, and I had an idea of how they would react, but how they reacted was so much better than I envisioned, and it was such a good experience for me, which I feel very lucky. So I ended up having my parents come over to my house, and I sat them down and basically just told them that Colby and I don't go to church anymore. And I was crying the entire time because I was so scared. And my dad immediately was just Shannon, we love you no matter what. You're an adult, you can make your own decisions. Of course we believe in the church, but that does not mean that you have to. And no matter what, we know who you are, we know you're our daughter, and we love you, and that's all that matters, is that you're true to yourself and a good person. And that meant so much to me. It was far better response than I could have imagined. And then of course they like had a few questions and I kind of tried to answer those, but it was just like a really good discussion, and I think it made our relationship better, which was really awesome. And then my other good example is one of my friends, like one of my best friends. I was also very scared to tell her because I know how active she is in the church, and I put it off for a really long time because we don't live near each other, so it wasn't like very, I don't know what the word is.
Like it wasn't an easy transition to like talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. Like it didn't really come up in conversation, and it wasn't like affecting our daily lives. Like we weren't around each other, so there was no way for her to like know or like ask about it at all. But so finally I just like bit the bullet and texted her, and her response was also so good. She immediately was like, I care about you so much. Thank you so much for telling me. It really means a lot. And then she immediately like asked clarifying questions like, is it okay if I do this around you? Like, what are your views on this? And like immediately set boundaries, which was awesome.
Yeah, I think those questions are like just like really cool.
Yeah, really helpful.
And I think it's kind of like both ways too. Like like you should ask, I feel like we should ask, is it okay if I have a drink if we go out to dinner? Or you know, like it should go both ways on like what everyone is comfortable around.
Totally. And so I thought that was so awesome. And then since it was over text, we kind of decided we would talk about it more later when we were in person, and we got to do that like I think last weekend. And that was really cool too, because then she was able to ask like more in-depth questions like, what do you believe now? What was behind what were more of the reasons? And so it was cool because it kind of just became like an ongoing discussion. And yeah, so those are both really awesome examples.
I have a question about Blake, because I know your brother, because when you first told your parents, I remember you kind of saying like, I don't really want to tell Blake because I don't want it to like influence him at all. So I'm curious, like when he found out.
I'll get to that.
Oh, okay, cool.
But yeah, I did not tell him at first. My brother is in high school, and both me and my parents were like, this conversation can probably wait until it's more necessary. Which is something I like wanted to talk to him about it, but I also didn't want to cause him like more stress. And so I kind of just like went along with it. Okay, now for my bad example. And I just want to preface this by saying like the person in this story, who I'm not going to say who it is one of my close family members. I do not think she had bad intentions at all. She just like really believes that the church is the only way to happiness, and was very, very sad to find out that I had left and wasn't prepared to respond.
Right.
And that kind of went both ways, I think. But so basically what happened was this member of my family, I guess, had been kind of like watching my social media and some of the things that I was doing, and started to have like a suspicion that I had left, which was interesting to me because I don't think I've really changed a lot of my like posting habits or habits in general. But she started to like realize, and so one day she called me and was like, can I come over? And I was like, sure, like thinking she was just gonna come over to say hi or to like bring me something. And she came in and sat down on my couch and just immediately asked like, do you go to church anymore? And I was not prepared to have this conversation at all. And so I was like, no, I don't. And she immediately just started like questioning me, being like, well, like, have you read the Book of Mormon? Have you talked to, who have you been talking to? Like all the questions we kind of talked about in the last episode. Yeah. Basically like, why would you do this? Why would you do this? Like over and over and over, just asking me that. And like, there's not one reason that I left. So it's like a hard question to answer, especially if you're not prepared and talking to someone who is trying to like basically discredit those things. I don't know if that's the right word, but so I would just say like there were a lot of reasons, and she like couldn't take that as an answer. And so we got into like a pretty heated discussion about some of the reasons I left, such as like the LGBTQ issues and a few other things. And it was like extremely like anxiety inducing for me because I was not expecting this at all. I was not prepared. And it was like extremely
like uncomfortable
situation. And I kept trying to end the conversation and say like, this is just what I've chosen. Like, I think you need to respect my decision, basically. And she just kept like coming in and being like, well, why have you done this? Like, who you've been talking to? And at one point she said, like, obviously it made her extremely sad. Like, I totally understand that. She, I think, had not been prepared to have the conversation either in a healthy way. And at one point she said, like, we just want you to be a part of this family. And I was so hurt by that. Like, I know she didn't mean it, and I knew that in the moment, but it's like, still, like, that's basically saying, like, you aren't going to church and now you're no longer a member of our family.
But did she mean just like an eternal perspective?
I think so, yeah. And so I was like really trying to be understanding, but this went on for a full hour. I just kept getting more and more like anxious and panicky, and finally she left. And as soon as she left, I like had a full-blown panic attack, like, which I have not had in a really long time. And I tried to call Colby, but he was at work, so he didn't answer. And I like didn't really know who else to call because like I tried calling my mom and I talked to her for a minute, but like she wasn't I don't think she understood how I was feeling. And she was kind of just like, well, those are some good questions to consider. And that's like not what I wanted to hear at all. And so that was just like really hard. And I think what made it the wrong conversation is that neither of us were prepared to have it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I will say that since then, this family member has apologized to me for all of that. She has been like very nice. Like, we're totally over it. It was just like a really bad situation at the moment.
And I almost think that like some people's reaction is like, you're not happy now. Like, like they think because the church brings them so much happiness, they immediately think like you've gone off the deep end and you like lost yourself and you need to like find yourself again and like get the blessings and the happiness that it brings them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then my last example is kind of an example of like how to react when maybe someone hasn't told you that they've left and you felt like they should have had that conversation with you, or if someone has told you and you're wondering what to do with that information, I guess. Like who you can tell about it, or like who to talk to if you need to talk to someone. I don't know. It's kind of like just a weird example, but this is kind of why I put it in here. So over like the few months after we like really left, Colby and I had both like been telling our families, and there was someone in Colby's family that he had not talked to yet. So he basically just hadn't talked to her. And I don't think Colby wasn't doing it as like, oh, well, I'm not going to tell her. It was just like, he was like, it's very emotionally draining to talk to people about this, especially if you do it individually. And so I think he was just kind of like burning out on the emotional side of things, and just figured like, oh, like I told most people in my family, I'm sure everyone knows now. So this person, I don't know, I'm guessing she probably felt left out, or maybe didn't, and maybe just heard and like didn't really understand that this is something like very personal. And she ran into my family somewhere, and my brother Blake was with them, and who I still hadn't told. And she immediately said to my family, have you heard the bad news? And they were like, what are you talking about? And she was like, Colby and Shannon left the church. And that's how my little brother found out. And this was another thing that I was like pretty hurt by, because like, of course she didn't know. I'm sure she wasn't doing it out of like maliciousness, but it's like,
also, if if you hadn't told your parents,
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just kind of one of those things that like it just like kind of crosses the boundary a little, and that boundary hadn't been set up. Like we hadn't told people not to tell anyone else. Like it wasn't a secret,
Right.
but it's just like one of those things where it's like that's not how I wanted Blake to find out. Like I wanted to be able to talk to him, and so I was pretty like upset by that. And so basically, I guess the lesson
The lesson in today's Sunday school.
Yeah. The thing that I guess I'm saying here is like if you hear it from someone or if you don't hear it from someone, like respect the fact that this is their story. And especially when it comes to people that they're close to, like don't spread it around, I guess. Like don't take it, and I don't know what I'm trying to say. Don't,
like, it's not your thing to tell.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I was joking with Charlotte about this, like it's like a coming out thing almost. Like
Yeah.
For some people, because they need to tell their families and their friends, but it's like if someone comes out to you, you're not going to go and tell everybody about it because it's not your thing to tell. Like it's
Exactly.
kind of similar.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, to me, especially with my family, like it's a big deal, and it may not, like if it's just your friend or something, like it may not seem like that big of a deal, but it could be. So I would say like either just keep it to yourself and talk about it with that person only, or ask them like, do you mind if I tell other people? Because I was very willing for my parents to tell anyone they wanted, because I don't want to have that conversation with everyone because it's so emotionally draining. But I think especially when it's someone close to you and it involves even another person, like just figure out who and what you can talk about, or just don't talk about it. Hopefully all that makes sense.
Yeah.
But so yeah, overall, I think the best way to respond if someone tells you that they're leaving the church and it's someone that you really care about, just immediately tell them that you care about them. Like even if it's awkward and that's not something you would normally talk about in your friendship, like with my friend who I told over text, like we don't really get that vulnerable with each other that often, but still she immediately said that, and I was like, that's so cool. Like that's such a good thing to say. So immediately tell them you care about them. You know they're still the same person. Like they're not gonna all of a sudden become evil or start doing all these like crazy things. Like they're still the same person. That's always what I was most scared of, especially with my parents, that they would be like super disappointed in me or see me as like the black sheep of the family or something like that. So yeah, just like let them know that you care about them. And then after that, listen to what they're saying, set up healthy boundaries around the topic. Like if you need to, like with my friend who was like, she asked like, do you care if I talk about the church around you? Do you care if, like, she's like, it's like still a big part of my life. And so is it okay if I talk about that around you? And I was like, of course. But I was like so happy that she asked. And then I think if it seems like a good time to ask clarifying questions, like ask more in depth about, well, why, what do you believe now? Like tell me more, then go ahead if it seems like a good time. But for me, I usually try to like keep the initial conversation short, because it's like a lot to take in. And so I liked, even with my parents, I did this. I was like, this is what's going on. I think we should talk more about it later. Because that allows some time for processing on both ends. And then later on, you can continue the conversation when you have more of a clear head.
Yeah.
So that was my long spiel about my advice on how to react. What about you?
So I like didn't really like come out and tell anyone specifically. The only person that I've really had, like with close family, the only person that I've really had a discussion about is my younger sister. And the reason why, so I was on the phone with her one time. This was like in October-ish. And the reason why I brought it up was because like she had been making tweeting about, I don't know how to say this, but she was just like tweeting things that made me think that she was struggling in the church. And it was nothing like nothing specific, but so I just thought that I would like bring it up to her in case she like wanted to talk about it or anything like that. So when I first told her, I just told her the story pretty much that I explained in the last episode. And then like her first response was just like, oh, have you read the Book of Mormon? Which I think is like a pretty typical response.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like way past that point, you know, where like
exactly
like
same.
No, like I'm not going to read the Book of Mormon because I've already like made my decision and I've already gone through it. And then the other night, so it's been a couple of months since like we had that first conversation. We were talking about my birthday, and because she's flying in, and I was just telling her that like I'm going out with friends for my birthday, and I said something that I shouldn't have said because it was kind of like a trigger word for her. And so that kind of spiraled into what I think she was kind of projecting things onto me where I don't even know what I said, but she just thought that I was thinking that she didn't know like how to have fun because she was still active in the church and didn't drink, which is, I have never had that thought before. Like Jana is really fun. And like I was just told her like I've been religious before. I've not drank before and I've still had fun. So like I know it's possible. And she was just kind of saying that she just can't wrap her head around it because we were raised in the same house and she doesn't understand like how we went different ways and believe different things now. And like the drinking thing makes her uncomfortable and she just feels like I'm a completely different person now, which in my head, it didn't really make sense because I've been drinking for like 2 years now. And it's just, I think it seemed like all of a sudden thing for her because I'm talking about it a lot more now. And so I just kind of had to tell her that everybody is different and we all live our lives in different ways. And you just have to like love people for people and not for what religion they are. And like, obviously don't be friends with someone if they're doing something that you really don't like and like their morals or standards make you unhappy. But I don't think that religion itself should determine any kind of relationship with that person.
Yeah, agreed.
So I was kind of explaining that to her, and then
I think that's something like that you're kind of like slyly taught in the church sometimes.
I think
like,
so.
Of course you should have like good friends who have like good morals, but I think sometimes that's taken to mean you should only be friends with people who are members. And I don't necessarily think anyone believes that.
Yeah.
Or at least you don't if you're like normal. But I think it's one of those things that's like kind of like subconsciously like taught.
I think
and like
so too.
Taken in.
And I think it's just like an easier thing. Like when you're in the church, you just know that members have the same standards as you.
Yeah.
So it's almost like just easier to think that way. But I do think that the church has a culture of us and them. Like there's members and non-members and there's like that line, but obviously it shouldn't be that way. So then when she brought up the drinking thing and how that like she doesn't know how to really react to that, I just explained to her that like when I drink I don't have anxiety and it makes me just more comfortable around people when I go out and more social, and that's kind of like why I drink. I don't drink like because I can't have fun any other way. Like and then that made her more comfortable once I like explained it. She's like, okay, that makes sense, because she also has anxiety and like we just cope with it in different ways.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling you to drink if you have anxiety. Like that is not a coping mechanism, but it's just something that helps me. So I think that she was just like really struggling with it because all of a sudden I was like talking about getting a tattoo, which I have talked about getting a tattoo for the last 3 years. So it's just, I'm talking about it more. So it's making her more stressed about like how to act around me. But it's just important to remember that I'm the same person. I just do different things now and believe different things. And those aren't the same thing. Like your personality and what you believe are not directly, I don't know, they are, but they,
yeah, I think I know what you're saying.
So yeah, I think the most important thing when telling loved ones, friends or family, when leaving the church, that you left the church, whatever, is to like be honest with them and give reasons and explain to them like why you're doing it. And like you said, there's like a time for that, and especially if you have to, for the other person, they have to have time to like wrap their mind around it. But I think just remembering that like people are people, and like religion isn't people. Like there's a difference. There was one story that you were telling me like back in November about someone coming out to their family, like in terms of being gay.
Yeah.
And you said something that this person had said, or their friend had said, is like, I didn't love that person because they were straight. Like, I just loved that person. And so I think that's kind of the same. Like, you don't love someone because they're Mormon or not Mormon. Like, you just love that person.
Yeah, I love that quote.
Yeah.
It's like, I think about that all the time.
Me too.
Yeah.
So I think it's just something to keep in mind. Like, if someone's telling you that they left the church, kind of analyze, like, why are you feeling that way? Are you internalizing it and kind of thinking, like, are you scared because that you believe that that person's not going to be with you anymore in heaven? Or are you concerned for them? And I think a lot of times people maybe react negatively because it's something about them. Like, they need to deal with it personally. And so just try not to project that onto them and like be mad at them. Because I try to think what it's like for people who like disown somebody, and like, why would they do that? And I really think it's just something that, like, it's on them. Like, it's something that they need to deal with and accept and come to terms with. And I just think it's kind of like, it's very sad and like messed up that they take out their anger on that person, and it's like, you can no longer be in our family anymore, when it's like they're exactly the same person that they were yesterday.
Yeah.
So the next question kind of just flows in from the last one, is have you lost any friends or family since leaving the church?
I actually haven't, which at least not any close ones. I guess I was really nervous to tell a lot of people because I didn't know how they would react, but I was actually never scared that any of them would end our relationship. I feel like really lucky to have friends and family who are very accepting. And I just think like I'm not the type of, I guess I don't really have friends that I think would end our relationship over something like this, and if I did have a friend like that, I would probably be like, oh, well, like, I guess that wasn't real friendship.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I mean, that being said, there were definitely some rough patches, like those experiences that I've had with some members of my family and some things that I was definitely hurt by, but I never thought that we wouldn't like make it through. I guess like Colby and I do have a few friends that we don't hang out with as much anymore, and it kind of like started fading away around the time that we started being more open about it, but it's hard to say if that can be like attributed to leaving the church or if it's just like we both got busy or we just like both drifted apart or something, but maybe it's like a little of both. I don't know.
Right.
What about you?
Yeah, me neither. Like, I didn't really lose anybody. I did notice several people unfollowed me on Instagram that I like considered friends, and some of them unfollowed me like the day that I posted on Instagram about the episode. And so that's like, it's kind of hurtful, but also it's just like social media. So, and that's just like the culture and the time that we live in, is social media kind of like affects us in a big way. And so it was kind of just like, are you serious? Like, I literally just told my experience and you unfollowed me. And I think that people who are still in the church feel scared to even like entertain the thought that somebody has left the church, if that makes sense. Because when you're in the church, you're like taught not to read anti-Mormon stuff, or like, I don't know, it's just very taboo, and you just can't you're like scared to even think about that. And so I think that's what it was for some people. And like, that's okay that they're scared to listen, because it's somebody who's kind of testing their beliefs in a way. I also had friends when I was in school that I had like kind of stopped hanging out with as much, kind of the same as you. And it's like hard to say why, but nobody that was like close to me. How are you treated differently, if at all?
It's hard to say. Like, I don't know if this is something I imagine or not, but it does seem like members try to talk to me about the church more, or just talk about it like when I'm around. And I think this happens mostly with family, so it's hard to tell if it's always been like that. Like, if people are just always talking about the church, which they probably are a lot of the time, but maybe I just notice it more now, or maybe it's like intentional. Like, I definitely notice like some people try to tell me more about like their spiritual experiences, or like tell me like the happiness that something at church brought them. And I don't know if they were always telling me those things or not. Like, I really don't know. But either way, it doesn't really bother me that much, as long as it doesn't like go on forever and that's all they talk about, which usually it's not. And yeah, that's mostly family. Like, I don't really think my friends have treated me any differently. I know that a couple of Colby's friends have kind of like, I don't know if you call it burying their testimonies, but have like talked to him about the church like in text, which is like a little different. But I think they probably just have the relationship where it's like that's probably like kind of normal. I don't know these friends, so who knows. But yeah, for the most part, I don't really think it's anything different, at least definitely not in a bad way. Other than that, the ward that I attended before I left has not really reached out at all, except for like right when we kind of stopped going, some like the bishopric would call a lot and just try to give us callings. And like every now and then my old visiting teacher will text me, but other than that, they have not really reached out. And I talk to my neighbors like pretty often when we were still going to church, but now I barely ever talk to them, which is like kind of normal because I don't really see them.
Right.
And most of them are in like very different stages of life than me. Like, they're older or they have kids, and so it doesn't really bother me, but I just think it's kind of interesting because most of the time people will say that like the church members will not leave people alone who stop going to church, but that has not been my experience at all, which is interesting but not bad.
Yeah, I think my answer is pretty similar to yours. Like, I haven't noticed that like family members talk to me more about church or anything, but I like naturally, like we talked in the last question, people just kind of drifted away. But I think it's because you don't see those people at church anymore, or activities or anything like that. So you just naturally are not in that environment with them anymore, and you just like live different lifestyles. So it's not really bad or anything like that. My grandma, when she knew that I like kind of stopped going to church, when I would call her, she'd be like, have you like gone back to church yet? But it wasn't like a judgy thing or like forcing me.
Yeah, she was just curious.
Yeah, she was just like wondering. And of course she's concerned and wants me to be in the church, but she's not going to force me to do anything that I don't want to do. And she hasn't brought it up for a really long time either. And then, like you said, when I was in that kind of limbo area, there were definitely people in the church were like trying to get me to stay in the church, but I don't think that's like really treating me differently. It's just kind of how it was and how it goes.
Totally.
So what do you believe now?
The question, now that we've had time to process.
Everyone wants to know.
Honestly, I don't really know, which I kind of like find a certain kind of peace and security in like just not knowing. I listened to this podcast recently, which is kind of hard to explain, but it was about like the mating rituals with birds. And they were trying to figure out like, because there are certain birds that like they no longer care about like the fitness of their partner. They just care about like how beautiful they are, which is like very interesting. And so they were like trying to go through like all these reasons why that might have happened. And there's like so many theories, but like they honestly have no idea why that would happen, because it's not like normal with evolution.
Oh.
It's not like normal evolution to
Right.
for animals to like move away from finding the best fitness in a mate and instead just finding the most beautiful one. But so like basically at the end of that podcast, they were basically saying like even science is just one big guessing game, and like how there's beauty in that, because anything could be true until it's proven wrong. And so that's kind of like where my beliefs are at right now. I think there definitely could be a higher power, but I kind of love that I don't know, because to me it makes life more meaningful. Like I want to be a good person because it's the right thing to do, not because I'm trying to get to heaven or like trying to get some other kind of reward. But I just kind of think I'll constantly be in the process of figuring out what I believe and just trusting that it will work out in the end. So it's not really a very good answer, but basically I just like not knowing for right now.
Yeah, I also have no idea like what I believe, and I think the hardest thing for me is the afterlife aspect of it, because death gives me so much anxiety. And I think with religion you have the secure feeling that you go somewhere afterwards, and it's kind of like something uplifting and positive happens when you die. And so with religion it's really nice to have that to fall back on and be like, oh well, a family member died and I'll get to see them afterwards. And it's like a coping mechanism almost to like have that faith.
Yeah.
And so now like I don't really have that, and I just don't know like what happens, and I don't know if I believe that there's something after, or I don't know. I think mostly right now I believe that nothing happens, which is extremely terrifying. But then I kind of go into this thought process of like the universe, or I'm going to talk about the universe later, but not in the same sense. Like space and galaxies and planets and stuff. And I'm like, how? Like, how does that exist?
Yeah.
You know? And I just go in this loop of like something had to like create that, but then where did that thing come from? And so then does that mean like there is nothing? And it's like a never ending hole. And like you were saying, nobody knows. Like you literally don't know until you die what happens. And for me that's not very comforting, but I kind of get what you're saying, where it's just like you don't have to worry about it because you're never going to know for sure, kind of thing. But I mostly believe in just the universe, how people say like put good vibes into the universe. I really believe that just putting positive thoughts and vibes out there brings positive energy to you. And so instead of saying like God or higher power or anything, I just say the universe. Yeah, so that's not really like a good answer either, but
we know nothing.
We know nothing. We don't believe anything. So I don't know, I guess I'm every religion because I'm no religion. I don't know.
What is the main difference you notice between like when you were in the church and between now? Why did I say between twice? Between.
I just noticed that I don't have that constant guilt anymore. When I was in the church, I was just like felt guilty for everything.
Even you were guilty for everything.
Oh, yeah. I was doing everything wrong.
Yeah.
But like really even when I was active, I was doing everything right, following all the commandments, I still felt guilty. And I think it's because of the expectations of being in the church, where the expectations that you have to do like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I'm only doing A, B, C because I like don't have enough time to do the rest. But that made me feel guilty that I'm like not doing that stuff. So just this constant feeling of guilt. And so now I don't have that. And I remember once I shifted like my mind thought process to like I'm not in the church anymore, that guilt just went away, and it was just a huge relief off of my shoulders. And I feel like I'm a lot happier with my life right now and the choices that I make, because I'm not constantly analyzing, like, can I do this? I can't do this. I have to repent about this. This is kind of like borderline right and wrong. And where right now it's just like, I get to decide what's right and wrong for me. And I'm like more in control of myself. So I think that's just like, that's the main difference for me.
Yeah, for me, I think it's kind of similar. Like, I just feel a lot more peace. And maybe that's just the contrast between like the way I felt when I was trying to make the decision, which was very the opposite of that. And that's not to say I never felt peaceful at church, because I definitely did. But now I think in life in general, I feel a lot more peace, and like I can finally be myself. Anyways, I just feel like I can finally be myself.
Right.
Like, I'm making the choices that I want to make, not because I feel like I have to, but because I want to.
I think all of these last questions are kind of the same, but still have different answers. But how is your thinking process different? Or do you have like lingering thoughts or things from being raised in the church?
Yeah, so the like first answer I think of is like kind of a weird answer, but I notice myself still like turning to prayer a lot. When you grow up in the church, like, you're taught that God can always hear your prayers, even if you just say them inside your head. And like, I was like, yes, that's amazing. Like, I don't have to say anything out loud. I can just like pray all the time. And I did. Like, I prayed all the time. And like, I don't really want to say it's been a hard habit to break, because I don't think it's a bad habit, and I haven't like tried to break it. But now that I don't necessarily like believe or know who I'm praying to, it's kind of like a weird sensation to like feel my mind be like, I should pray about this. And then being like, who am I praying to? Or
or like, is this even doing anything? Right.
And then, so that's like one of the weird things that has been like very lingering. And then I also had, and I think I still have, a lot of, I don't want to say damaging beliefs, but just like things that the church kind of teaches that I don't necessarily think are right, which we kind of talked about in the last episode. Which I think we'll probably go more into this in another episode, but I had a lot of body image issues and a lot of shame around sex and like word of wisdom type stuff. And I still catch myself feeling those like every now and then, even though I never necessarily believed them or wanted to think them, but they're like still there. So it's kind of, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think we'll talk about that more later probably.
With the praying thing, it's kind of like if you lose your wallet, like, you just pray about it and then you find it kind of thing. Like that's just.
Or like, I was driving in like a really, really bad snowstorm like just last weekend, and I like immediately was like I would have always just been like driving, praying. Like,
right. Yeah.
Praying 100%.
Yeah. It's
and this time I was like praying, but at the same time I'm like, I don't know
if this is gonna work.
Like, I don't know if this is really doing anything, but it's still like a comforting thing to do for me, I guess.
Yeah. I don't think if I've done that. I mean, there are times where I immediately go into a prayer, but it's very, very rare. But it's just like if I'm really stressed out, or like when I was unemployed, I was like, I'm just gonna say a prayer and like whatever. If it works, it works, and whatever. But yeah, I have also had like a lot of those kinds of beliefs those damaging, I guess, beliefs that I still deal with. Specifically, the hardest thing for me is sexuality in my relationships, because it's really hard for me to break that right from wrong thing and where the line is, because in the church, it's so strict and like direct to not do anything except like hold hands or kiss pretty much. And like anything past that you should not do before you're married. And so like when I'm out of the church now and like I don't believe that that's wrong, it's still hard for me to convince myself that it's not wrong, even though like I know I believe that and I don't think it's wrong. It feels wrong still.
Yeah. And I would say that's even like not just a church thing, it's kind of like society as a whole. And the church like amplifies it. That has been like my experience, because I think like just society, especially around like females, there's like a lot of like, oh, you should remain pure, and like you shouldn't do these certain things because then you're gonna be like,
and like a guy doesn't want you if you've been with too many people. Yeah.
And so I think there's like that, but then the church amplifies it, so then it's even harder to like break those thought patterns.
Yeah. And like it's not necessarily that I feel guilty about it, but almost like shameful. And then along with that, I have no confidence in it, in whatever I'm doing, which I don't like. I don't want to talk about it that much, but yeah, I think it's just that thing, like I don't know what I'm doing, because I felt very like naive, and I still like, even if I feel like I am educated, I still feel naive about it because I'm almost 26 and just barely learning stuff. Like, so it's just like really hard around like that aspect of relationships. And then just dating in general has been really hard for me. At first, when I was like in that weird limbo stage, I didn't know if I should date members or non-members. And because like when you're dating members, there's a lot of expectations that are already set for you. Like, you're usually dating with marriage in mind, and like that's your end goal. That's why you date. And also there's no sex to worry about, and there's like not as much pressure in that area because it's the expectation that you're not going to do it anyway. So now everything is just kind of like a toss up where I don't know what religion they are, how much do they know about Mormonism and like my background and what I grew up believing. Do they have the same morals as me? Like, and then even going towards like, when are we going to kiss, or like what are the expectations around that, and like what if I don't want to do something, but like how do I tell them that? Because in the church it's like an excuse, like, oh, we shouldn't do this, like we shouldn't be doing this isn't allowed. So it's like, okay, then you stop or you don't stop or whatever. But now it's just like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I feel comfortable with doing, because I'm constantly thinking like, do I want to do this because now I can do it without feeling guilty, or do I want to do this because I want to do this with this person? And that is just, I feel the most messed up in regards to dating and that sense. Yeah. And I guess maybe we'll go into this more in another episode, but also I don't really want to talk about it that much.
We're talking about
it. I mean, I do want to talk about it, but I don't want some people to listen to it. Because yeah, it's just whatever. Yeah. I've said everything. Okay. What has been hard for you to let go of?
Actually a lot. Pretty much all of the things that I really love about the church. So like I talked about how much I love girls camp, but also like the Young Women's program I love. Little things like making breakfast and staying in PJs all day during general conference, and like the little traditions that you have that you don't really have anywhere else because they're specific to the church. Temple weddings, I loved going to them, and I love like the goal of like getting married, and like it sounds so dumb because it's not like really me, but like getting married in like a beautiful like white temple, like I just think it's really pretty and it means a lot. So I kind of miss that, and the community aspect in general of the church, I guess. Like I didn't really have it as much as an adult, just because of where we lived and like the kind of things that we were doing, but I still saw the potential for it. And so I missed that. And I also, like when I was deciding to leave, had a really hard time with not knowing how to raise my future kids, which I talked to a few different people about, and they were like, what? Like, that's such a random thing to think, but like the church provides such a good game plan and structure for families. Like, you know that when your baby turns a certain age, they're going to go into nursery, and then they're going to go into primary, and there's these like manuals and certain things that you can teach them, and all these things that are like it's just such a family-oriented church, and they give you so much guidance on like how to raise a family, and it's really like a lot of it is really good, like advice and a plan. Stepping away from the church kind of felt like stepping into the dark in that aspect, which is like crazy because I don't even have kids yet, but I was like really nervous about that. But now I would say I'm probably more confident that I'll figure it out. But that was one thing that I was like, I have no idea what to do anymore. Like,
Right.
I don't know how to raise a child not in this church or not in a religion.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, maybe I will raise them in a religion. Who knows? But overall, I just, like, one of the things I miss the most is the stability of the church. Like, knowing on Sunday you go for 2 to 3 hours, knowing that there's like this community of people that you can call if you need help. And the church felt like home to me for so much of my life, and I really miss that feeling.
Yeah. I don't think your fear of raising kids is crazy, because I'm not even married, and I think that too. I'm like, do I raise them? Because like my dad wasn't a member, my mom still raised us LDS, and so I don't know. Yeah, that is something that is kind of hard to let go of, is raising your family in a Mormon church, because that's what you lived your life thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like, yeah, how am I going to raise them? And I think another thing too is, I don't know if this is directly related to the church or just like I've changed as a person, but I used to want a like huge family, like 5 kids or more. Like I wanted a ton of kids, and now I'm like, I don't even know if I do want kids, or if I do, it'll be like way later than I originally had planned or thought. And I only want maybe like 2 now. And I think I've just changed as a person, but I think part of that changing has been leaving the church.
Yeah.
So it's kind of shifted that mentality of having a big family. And another thing is the community in the church is kind of hard, because you always had a place to meet new people. And especially with dating, like you just could always meet new people and new potential people to date in the church, and all the activities that come along with it. And then the path of the church, that the church sets a path that is very easy to follow. It's like especially with dating, like, I don't know, that's the biggest difference for me. So I always had the goal of getting married in the temple. And then when I was in like this weird limbo, it was kind of like, okay, well, am I going to date someone who wants to get married in the temple, or am I going to date a Mormon? Like maybe we won't get married in the temple, all of that kind of stuff. And now I have to shift my mind with like, how do you even have a wedding that's not in the temple, you know? And like, I have to think about all these things that I'm not used to, and I haven't even experienced, because most of my friends have gotten married in the temple and have like Mormon weddings, and all my family has, and so it's nothing that I know how to do. Totally. I said that really weird, but I don't know how to do it, and like I don't even know. Marriage in general is a weird or weddings are a weird concept for me, where it's such like a religious based thing. Like, why do we even need a wedding kind of thing? Mm-hmm. Like there's a celebration part of it, which I like, but then when you get married, like at any altar, you have like a priest or somebody who's making like a religious tie to it. And it's like, if I don't believe that, then what's the point of having that? So that's like the hardest thing to move on from, is the whole like just path. And all my thoughts are just like everywhere right now. But
no, that makes sense.
Yeah. And like even the afterlife, just everything that we've talked about previously, it's all hard. It's not easy to just be like, I'm not Mormon anymore. I don't believe this anymore, because there's a lot that goes with that. Anyway, okay. Is there anything else?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot more that we could talk about, or like we could just leave it.
Yeah.
Okay, so like what is our last minute advice, I guess, for both ways? Like people who need to tell people that they left the church, and then people who are receiving that news.
Yeah, so I guess my main advice for people telling their loved ones is one, be understanding that they might have a hard time with this news. Be honest. Don't try to soften it, and don't like make it sound like you're just taking a break or something if you're not. Like if you're leaving for good, be honest about that, because otherwise that's just going to make it harder in the long run. And like allow time for them to process, I think, is my biggest advice, because all the good conversations I've ended up having have been like that. Like there's been kind of like a break in the middle of a longer conversation. And also like be open to answering questions if you're comfortable with that, and if you're not, then just set boundaries. For people receiving, I would say be loving, be accepting, let them know you care about them, and set boundaries as well. Like just figure out how to move forward as like pertaining to this topic in your relationship, and just continue letting them know that you care about them no matter what.
Yeah,
I
think communication on both ends, like how your friend responded, and in like asking what she can talk about, or things like that on both ends, I think is really great boundaries to set, and just communication on both ends. And then I think also when you're receiving the news, like I said earlier, just kind of don't react right away. Like if you need time to think about it and process it, then take that time and kind of think about how you're feeling and why you're feeling that way. And if you're feeling it because of you or because of them, kind of. I don't know if that makes sense, and I don't know how to explain that, because I don't want to say like you being mad is your fault, but like it kind of it's on you, you know.
And you have to realize that the person coming to you is like coming in a very vulnerable state, and like is probably really nervous, and like how you react can shape your relationship in the future, and you don't want to hurt them with how you react, basically. So even if you are hurt, like that's kind of why I say like make time to process, so that you can come back with a more clear head.
I think that's it.
Oh, I would say also for people who are telling their loved ones, like make a plan. And if you need, like you said, if you need time to think about what that plan will be, take that time. Like you don't have to make your decision and then immediately tell everyone. I waited quite a long time before I did, because I wanted to be sure, and I wanted to know how to express myself in the best way.
So that's it for this episode. Thank you, Shannon, for coming on again.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to have more of these, so if you have anything pertaining to this topic or other topics that you want us to cover, or you have questions about anything that we've said or anything that you're curious about, you can email me at sometimesinshambles.podcast@gmail.com. And also, if you have like any experiences or stories of your own that you would like us to read, we would do an episode or just like read some of those responses, and we can keep it anonymous. If you would like us to, just let us know.
Also, I feel like I should say my corrections corner.
Oh yeah.
From the last episode. Colby, my husband, wanted me to clarify that he was not apathetic in the whole process. He cared deeply. I think I made it sound like he was kind of just along for the ride, but he definitely wasn't. Like he is very involved and has a lot of his own feelings about this. So I don't want to make it sound like he didn't. So I just feel like I should say that. So that
and I actually kind of had one too. Just because I felt like I didn't talk about like my history in the church a lot, and so I just don't want to be like misunderstood that because I said that I was inactive like until I was 9, I don't want people to think that I was inactive like my whole life. And so this, like, of course she's gonna have doubts or whatever. Like I was very active in the church. And like I went to EFY, I did girls camp, I was in leadership in church, all of that. Like my best friend and her family invited me to go to Hawaii one summer, and I chose EFY over Hawaii because I thought it was the right thing to do.
So classic.
So like, I don't know, I just like wanted to put that out there, and I don't want people to think that I was like inactive forever. And like I was obsessed with Utah. Like growing up in high school, I always was like, oh, I wish I just like went to high school in Utah. It'd be so much easier. And like BYU was the only school I wanted to go to, and it was the only school I didn't get into. And I just like, I was obsessed with all things Mormon. So
yeah, I feel you.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was Corrections Corner. Yeah, so I'll just read off my socials, and you can contact me on any of these platforms. So email, I already said. Instagram is at Sometimes in Shambles. Twitter is at ShamblesPod. Yeah, if you have anything to say. And then Shannon, do you want to say your socials?
Yes, so you can find me at Salty Wanders on Instagram, and feel free to message me there, even though my Instagram has nothing to do with this topic. I'm definitely open, and I have a blog at saltyspaces.com.
Yeah. And one more thing, I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast already follow me on my personal account, and I've gotten messages where it's like, I know I'm supposed to email you. I don't care what platform you message me on. Like if it's my personal account that you already follow, or whatever platform it is, just talk to me. And then also please review my podcast. It helps me a lot, like get more recognized, and it moves me up on the charts, which helps me get recognized. So even if you just listen to one episode, just review that one episode. But I would appreciate it a lot, and it helps a lot. And that's it. So thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Sometimes in Shambles. The intro music was done by my friend Lucas Cathy, and the artwork was done by me, myself, Melissa. If you liked this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.